My name is Evelyn, and at 66 years old, I thought I had earned peace. For 40 years, I stood at the front of a high school classroom, chalk in hand, teaching teenagers who rolled their eyes 1 minute and surprised me with brilliance the next. Teaching wasn't just a job, it was my life's rhythm. When my husband Robert was diagnosed with cancer, I cared for him through every treatment, every sleepless night, every frail breath. When he passed 2 years ago, it was as if the floor had given way beneath me. The house we had built together suddenly felt cavernous, haunted by his absence. I have 3 children. Laura, my eldest, is sharp, ambitious, and far too practical for her own good. She married Tom, a man whose handshake feels like a contract and whose smile never reaches his eyes. Michael, my middle child, is quiet, always the peacemaker, though his silence often means surrender. Jenny, the youngest, lives out of state. She calls now and then, but drifts in and out of the family like a guest who never quite settles. And then there is Grace, my granddaughter, Laura's daughter. At 19, she is everything good I see left in this family. She visits me after her college classes, curls up on the sofa with her books, and laughs in a way that makes the house feel alive again. She has her grandfather's kindness and a spark of independence that reminds me of myself before life wore me down. My home has been my anchor. Robert and I bought it 40 years ago with borrowed money and stubborn determination. Every wall, every creak in the floor carries a memory. Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere, birthdays with candles melting too fast, nights when the kids fell asleep to the sound of Robert strumming his guitar. After his death, the house became my sanctuary, the last piece of him I could hold. I believed my children would honor that they would understand what it meant to me, that blood would bind us together, not pull us apart. But families don't always break in obvious ways. Sometimes the cracks run deep and silent until one day everything shatters at once. I didn't know it yet, but my shattering was about to come. My 66th birthday should have been a simple gathering. Grace helped me frost a chocolate cake the night before, insisting, "Grandma, birthdays matter, no matter how old you are." I set out Robert's old china, polished the silver, and told myself it would be a night of family, laughter, and maybe even healing. Laura arrived first, Tom right behind her, his cologne filling the room before he even spoke. Michael followed, quiet as always, and Jenny had flown in for the weekend. For a fleeting moment, seeing them all together, I thought maybe things were looking up. Dinner was polite, though I felt Tom's eyes surveying the house like a buyer inspecting property. Grace sat beside me, chatting brightly, determined to keep the mood light. When the cake came out, candles glowing, I almost believed the evening would end in peace. But as the last candle flickered out, Laura rose from her chair. She clinked her glass, her voice carrying over the table. "Mom, we need to talk about the future." The hair on the back of my neck prickled. "Can it wait until after we've had cake?" I asked, forcing a smile. Tom put a hand on her shoulder and shook his head. "No time like the present." Laura's tone was firm, businesslike. "We've decided it's best for you to move into assisted living. There's a wonderful facility just outside town, medical staff on site, activities, everything you'll need." The room went still. My fork slipped against the china, scraping loudly. I looked from face to face, searching for a sign this was a cruel joke. "Excuse me?" Tom leaned forward, all smooth confidence. "It's for your own good, and we've already started the process of selling this house. Dividing the proceeds evenly between us will be cleaner for everyone." Grace gasped, her chair screeching as she stood. "You can't do that. This is Grandma's house. Grandpa built this house." Laura shot her daughter a warning look. "Grace, sit down. This is an adult decision." But Grace didn't sit. She planted herself beside me, trembling with fury. "You don't get to throw her out like trash. She belongs here." I felt the air drain from my lungs, but anger surged hot behind my ribs. I looked at Laura, my own flesh and blood, standing with her husband's hand tightening possessively on her arm. "On my birthday," I said, my voice shaking, "you announce you're stealing my home and locking me away?" Laura didn't flinch. Tom didn't blink. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. I rose from my chair so quickly it nearly toppled backward. My hands shook, not from weakness but from fury. Laura, I said, my voice sharp, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't sit here, in my house, on my birthday, and decide to throw me out. Her jaw tightened. Mom, this isn't about throwing you out. It's about safety. You're getting older. It's too much house for you to handle. Tom and I are just trying to do what's best. What's best? I snapped. Best for who? For me or for you? Tom leaned forward, his tone slick, rehearsed. Evelyn, no one is trying to hurt you. But the reality is, this house is an asset, tied up in brick and wood. It can be liquidated to benefit all three children. Isn't that fair? Grace slammed her hands on the table. Fair? She raised you. She cared for Grandpa until the day he died, and now you want to stick her in some home so you can cash out? Laura's eyes flicked toward her daughter, cold and dismissive. Grace, stay out of this. You don't understand how finances work. Michael finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost apologetic. Maybe we should slow down. But Laura cut him off. No, Michael, we've delayed long enough. The house goes on the market next month. Jenny shifted uncomfortably in her chair, biting her lip but said nothing. I turned on her desperate. Jenny, are you going to stand there and watch your sister do this? Say something. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I don't want to get in the middle. The betrayal was suffocating. I looked around the table, the children I had raised, the meals I had cooked, the sacrifices I had made, and all I saw were strangers. All except Grace, who stood beside me trembling with fury and love. I drew myself up, my voice cold as steel. If you do this, Laura, if you sell this house, you won't just lose these walls, you'll lose me, and you'll lose the last shred of respect this family has left. For the first time, Laura's expression flickered, but Tom tightened his grip on her arm, steering her like a puppet. The decision is made, he said flatly. The silence that followed was heavier than stone, and in that silence, something inside me broke, but another part began to harden. The birthday night ended in a haze. I lay awake until dawn, Grace asleep in the chair beside my bed, her hand wrapped around mine like a lifeline. I wanted to believe Laura's announcement had been nothing more than Tom's influence, a cruel mistake we could undo. But deep down, I knew better. 2 days later, I went to the bank. I wanted to reassure myself that at least my retirement savings were still mine, that even if they took my home, they couldn't touch the years Robert and I had worked to put money aside. The teller's polite smile froze when she pulled up my account. Mrs. Carter, your retirement portfolio was moved into a managed trust last month under your daughter's authority. My daughter? I asked, my voice trembling. That's not possible. I never signed. She turned her screen slightly toward me, showing the electronic authorization form. And there it was, my name scrawled across the bottom. But it wasn't my handwriting, not even close. Cold flooded my veins. This is a forgery. I'm afraid you'll need to take it up with the trust administrator, she said softly, sliding a card across the counter. That night, I confronted Michael, hoping, begging that one of my children would stand with me. He sat at my kitchen table, eyes downcast, twisting his wedding ring around his finger. Michael, I whispered, holding out the forged form. You know I didn't sign this. Did you know they were taking my money? He flinched, but didn't deny it. Tom said it was just for management, that it would protect the funds. He pressured me to agree. I thought it was harmless. Harmless? My voice cracked. They drained everything your father and I saved. Do you have any idea what you've allowed them to do? Michael's silence was answer enough. Later, Grace found me sitting alone in the dark. She knelt beside me, her face pale with fury. Grandma, they're not going to stop. They'll take every penny, every brick, until you have nothing left. You can't let them. I cupped her cheek, my tears falling hot and fast. They've already taken everything. But even as I said it, a voice inside whispered, not yet. The letter came on a cold March morning, a thick envelope, stamped and sealed, left on my porch like a death notice. Inside was the official eviction order, 30 days to vacate. My own children's names were listed on the filing. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it, the paper trembling in my hands. The same table where Robert and I had eaten dinner every night, where I'd helped Laura with spelling tests, Michael with math homework, Jenny with science projects. Now it was where they signed me out of my own life. When the movers arrived, hired by Tom, not me, I stood numbly as strangers carried out my belongings. Robert's armchair, the quilt I stitched during his chemo treatments, the oak hutch my parents had given us as a wedding gift. Each piece that left the house felt like another part of my body ripped away. Laura avoided my eyes, standing stiff near the doorway. Tom barked orders like a general, directing men who had no idea they were dismantling 40 years of love. Michael hovered, silent, and Jenny wept quietly in the corner but did nothing to stop it. Grace clung to me, her arms wrapped around my waist. "Grandma, please don't go. This is your home." I kissed her hair, though my own heart was breaking. It was my home, now it's theirs. When the last box was gone, Tom changed the locks while I watched. The click of the new bolt sounded like a coffin lid sealing shut. That night, I lay on a borrowed bed in my friend Helen's spare room. The air smelled of lavender and books, kind but unfamiliar. I stared at the ceiling, hearing echoes of Robert's voice, his promise that he'd never let me be alone. Tears slid into my ears as I whispered into the dark, "I've lost everything, Robert. Even the children we raised turned me out." The weight of betrayal pressed so heavy on my chest that I wondered if my heart would give out before morning. For the first time in my life, I wished it would. Helen found me at her kitchen table 3 days later, still in my nightgown, a cup of cold coffee untouched in front of me. I must have looked half ghost because she set a cardboard box down with unusual care. "I found this when I helped the movers clear out your attic," she said. "It has Robert's handwriting on it. Thought you should see it." The box was dusty, edges splitting, the words "for Evelyn" if needed scrawled across the top. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were yellowed photographs, old bank statements, and a thick envelope stamped by our lawyer's office. I unfolded the document and gasped. It was Robert's will. Not the edited version Tom and Laura had waved at me last year, but the original, witnessed and notarized. My eyes skimmed down until the words nearly blurred. "In the event that any child of mine should seek to seize assets through coercion or fraud, full ownership of all property, savings, and investments shall pass directly to my wife, Evelyn Carter, or, if she is unable, to my granddaughter, Grace Carter." I read it again, out loud this time, my voice shaking. "If the children try to take it unfairly, it all comes to me. Or Grace." Helen squeezed my shoulder. "He knew Evelyn. He must have known they'd be capable of this." Tears filled my eyes, but for the first time in months they weren't from despair. Robert hadn't left me defenseless. He'd left me armed. Grace came straight from class when I called her. She listened as I read the clause aloud, her face blazing with triumph. "Grandma, this changes everything. They can't take what's already yours, and if they keep pushing, the law will put it all in my hands." I pressed the will against my chest, a spark of life returning to me. For weeks I had been drowning, abandoned by my own children. Now I had a lifeline, a weapon. The sorrow still sat heavy, but beneath it burned something fiercer, resolve. "They thought they buried me," I whispered, the corners of my mouth curling into the faintest smile. "But they only planted me." Grace and I walked into Jennings and Lee law offices the very next morning. I held Robert's original will pressed tight against my chest like a shield. The receptionist ushered us into a paneled office that smelled faintly of leather and dust. Mr. Jennings, a man with kind eyes behind steel-rimmed glasses, adjusted his tie as I spread the document before him. He read carefully, lips moving as he scanned the lines. When he finished, he looked straight at me. "Mrs. Carter, this will is ironclad. If your children acted under coercion or forgery, the estate is entirely yours. If you're unable to act, it transfers to your granddaughter Grace. They may have bluster, but you have the law." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Grace gripped my hand under the table. "But," Jennings continued, "we'll need proof, signatures, transactions, anything that shows fraud." Grace leaned forward, her young face fierce. "We already have bank records showing her funds transferred without consent. And my dad—" She bit her lip, then forced the words out. "He bragged once about getting Grandma out of the way. If I can get him talking, I can record it. Jennings nodded slowly. In this state, that's admissible. One-party consent. If he slips, it'll bury them. That evening at Helen's kitchen table, Grace and I spread our notes like generals preparing for war. Gather the trail. Certified copies of the forged authorization from the bank and Robert's will. Record Tom. He couldn't resist boasting. All Grace needed was a little push. Follow the money. Jennings suspected Tom funneled funds into his real estate venture. If we traced it, we'd see his hands dirty. Strike quietly, then all at once. Build the case in silence, then reveal it where they couldn't wriggle free. Grace scribbled furiously, her eyes shining. We'll hit them from both sides, legal and financial. When it lands, they won't see it coming. I stared at her, pride swelling in my chest. She was Robert's legacy, sharp and unflinching. I closed the notebook, my hands steady for the first time since I lost my home. They wanted me silent. Instead, I'll make sure they hear me louder than ever. And that night, lying awake in Helen's guest room, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt ready. 2 weeks later, I made my first strike. Quiet, deliberate. I went to the bank with Grace at my side and withdrew Robert's emergency bonds, money he'd hidden away years ago, untouched, just in case. Kelly might have thought she'd clean me out, but she hadn't known about this. Robert had always said, never let all your eggs sit in one basket. With that cashier's check in hand, we drove straight to Jennings's office. He had already confirmed what Grace and I suspected. Tom's real estate company was drowning in debt. He was scrambling for investors, desperate enough to take anyone's money without checking too closely. By the end of that week, I signed the paperwork. I became a silent partner with enough shares to make my vote matter. Tom didn't even know I was in the room, his own mother-in-law, slipping into the very foundation of his empire, but that wasn't all. Grace, clever as ever, had coaxed her father into a long phone call. She played it back for me one night at Helen's kitchen table. Tom's voice was unmistakable, smug and careless. We had to push her out, Laura. Otherwise, we'd never see a dime. Once the house sells and the accounts are under us, she'll have no choice but to stay quiet. I closed my eyes, relief and fury mixing in equal measure. That recording was the knife. My new stake in his company was the twist. Grace grinned, her youthful fire lighting up the room. Grandma, we've got him cornered. He just doesn't know it yet. I smiled back, a grim, satisfied smile. Then let's make sure when he falls, everyone's watching. The pieces were set. My children had thought they'd stripped me of everything. What they'd really done was hand me the perfect chance to strike back. Laura called for a family dinner. She said it was time to ease the tension and move forward. I knew better. This was Tom's stage, his chance to gloat. I arrived with Grace and Mr. Jennings at my side. Laura's house gleamed, spotless and cold, like her smile when she opened the door. Tom was already seated at the head of the table, wineglass in hand, wearing the smug grin of a man who thought he'd already won. Evelyn, he said smoothly, I'm glad you came. It's important for you to accept the new reality. The house is ours to handle now. You'll be comfortable at the facility. Everyone wins. Grace's hand tightened around mine. Jennings cleared his throat, but let me speak first. I set a thick folder on the table and opened it slowly. Funny you mention reality, Tom, because I brought some of it with me. His smile faltered. First, I laid out Robert's original will, the one with the survivorship clause and the safeguard against fraudulent seizure. According to this, every asset passes to me. And if I cannot act, it all passes to Grace. Not you, not Laura, not Michael or Jenny, just us. Laura's face drained of color. Michael leaned forward, blinking hard. Jenny covered her mouth with her hand. Tom let out a laugh, too loud, too forced. That paper means nothing. The house is already being processed for sale. I slid the county-certified copy of the property deed across the table. Not when the transfer was filed with a forged signature. Jennings spoke then, his voice measured. We've already verified through a handwriting expert. This is fraud. Before Tom could recover, Grace pulled out her phone and pressed play. His own voice filled the room, dripping with arrogance. We had to push her out, Laura. Otherwise, we'd never see a dime. Once the house sells and the accounts are under us, she'll have no choice but to stay quiet. The room exploded with whispers. Michael went pale. Jenny's eyes filled with tears. I leaned forward, my voice sharp as steel. That's you, Tom. Your words, your scheme. And just so you know, this recording has already been filed with the court. Tom's hand tightened around his glass until it cracked. You think you can destroy me with a few papers and a phone call? I sat back, calm and steady. Not destroy, expose. And exposure, Tom, is something you'll never recover from. The balance had shifted. They all knew it. Tom's glass shattered in his hand, red wine streaking across the white tablecloth like blood. He shot to his feet, face twisted in rage. You old hag, he snarled, pointing at me. You think you can embarrass me in front of my own family? You're finished, Evelyn. You should be grateful I even let you sit at this table. Grace stood so fast her chair toppled. Don't you dare talk to her like that. Her voice cracked, but it rang through the dining room with the force of a slap. Tom sneered at her. Stay out of this, little girl. You don't know anything about the real world. Without me, you and your grandmother would be living in the gutter. Without you, Grace shot back, her fists clenched, we'd still have peace and Grandma would still have her home. Laura grabbed Tom's arm, trying to calm him. Tom, stop! He shook her off, his anger boiling over. No, she needs to hear this. Evelyn was never more than dead weight. Robert carried her through life, and now she's clinging to scraps, trying to drag us all down with her. Michael pushed back his chair, face flushed. That's enough, Tom. His voice trembled but carried a conviction I'd never heard before. Jenny, tears spilling down her cheeks, whispered, How could you say that? She's our mother. The room pulsed with tension, the air thick and brittle. Relatives shifted uncomfortably, whispering. Some averted their eyes, but others leaned in, hungry to see the unraveling. I rose slowly, steady despite the storm raging around me. You just showed everyone exactly who you are, Tom. Not a son-in-law, not a provider, just a greedy little man who thinks cruelty is power. Grace slid beside me, her hand gripping mine tight. If Grandma leaves, I leave too. I'll never spend another night under your roof. Laura's face blanched, torn between her husband's fury and her daughter's defiance. Tom's mouth opened, ready to spew another insult, but the shift was already happening. The room no longer belonged to him. The tide had turned, and he knew it. The silence after Grace's declaration was electric. Everyone stared at Laura, waiting to see which way she would lean. Tom's chest heaved, his fists still clenched, but his bluster was faltering. Michael broke it first. He rose to his feet, voice low but steady. I've kept quiet too long. Mom's right. Tom pressured me to sign papers I didn't understand. He said it was just procedure, that it would protect the assets. I let him bully me into it, but it was wrong. Tom spun on him, spittle flying. You coward! You'd still be living in your mother's basement if not for me. Michael flinched but didn't back down. Maybe, but I'd rather be a coward than a thief. Jenny stood too, tears streaking her face. I knew, Mom. I knew something wasn't right. Laura told me not to ask questions, and I stayed silent because I didn't want to lose my sister, but I lost you instead. I won't do it again. Laura's face went pale. She looked at her siblings, then at Grace, her daughter, standing tall at my side. For the first time that evening, her mask cracked. Tom, she whispered, her voice thin. Did you really forge her name? Tom barked a bitter laugh. Forge? That's such a dramatic word. It was paperwork. A technicality. Don't act like you weren't ready to cash in, Laura. The room sucked in a collective breath. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Laura's hand fell from his arm. She took a step back, her lips trembling. You told me it was legal, that it was the only way to keep things clean. Legal? I cut in, my voice cold. That recording Grace made proves otherwise, and every person in this room just heard you admit it yourself. Tom's face twisted, but the power had drained from him. He looked around and saw no allies, not even his wife. I straightened, the folder of evidence still before me. Your grip on this family is broken, Tom. Tonight everyone here saw the truth. Laura stared at the floor, silent, her loyalty finally cracking under the weight of reality. Michael and Jenny moved closer to me, their shoulders squared, as though ready to shield me if Tom lashed out again. The tide wasn't just turning, it had turned, and I knew the final strike was coming. I lifted the last document from my folder and placed it squarely in the center of the table. The seal glinted under the chandelier. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is proof of my investment in your company, Tom. As of last week, I am now the largest shareholder. Every reckless loan, every fake deal, you no longer control it. I do." Gasps rippled around the table. Michael's jaw dropped. Jenny covered her mouth. Grace squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. Tom's face twisted. You sneaky old—" I cut him off, louder now. "And this affidavit," I tapped the notarized page, "already sits with the district attorney's office alongside your recording and the forged documents. By next week, you won't just be out of this house, you'll be answering questions in a courtroom." Laura stepped back from him, her face drained. "Tom, you told me." He turned on her, wild-eyed. "Don't you dare abandon me now." But she did. Her silence was louder than any words. I straightened, letting my gaze sweep the room. "You tried to erase me. You stole my savings. You put me out of my home. But tonight, I take it all back. This house, these memories, this family, they belong to me, not you." Tom's rage boiled over, but with no allies left, he stormed out. The door slammed so hard the chandelier rattled. When the echo faded, the only sound was Grace's quiet whisper, "You won, Grandma." I exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting from my shoulders. "No," I said softly. "We won." The weeks that followed felt like waking from a nightmare. Tom's company crumbled under the scrutiny of auditors I now controlled. His name in town was mud. Laura filed for separation, though I doubted it would heal the scars. Michael came by often, fixing the leaky faucet, planting flowers by Robert's grave. Jenny apologized with every phone call, trying to rebuild what she had let break. Trust would take time, but for once they were trying. And Grace, dear Grace, moved into the guest room upstairs. The house was alive again with her laughter, her music, the scent of her coffee drifting through the halls. At night, I'd sit on the porch with Robert's old quilt around my shoulders. For the first time since he died, I didn't feel alone. His foresight had protected me. My resolve had carried me, and my granddaughter's courage had given me strength I thought I'd lost. They tried to silence me. Instead, I spoke louder. They tried to strip me bare. Instead, I stood taller. I was Evelyn Carter, and I would never be erased again. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories with Aunt Linda, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.